This past year, I've been working a lot on creating online courses. This requires a lot of AV work that I haven't been familiar with in the past. The first project can be especially daunting. After you get a few under your belt, though, things begin to get easier. You begin to understand the way you're doing things, and it's tempting to settle into the way that you've been doing things thus far. If you have a style that works and you're effective at it, why would you want to change that? Now, when things are working in smaller endeavors, there's not really a reason to then go about changing them. But with significant endeavors, like creating an online course, making changes that can lead to significant improvements can lead to significant growth. For example, in my first course, every time I turned my mic on, my heart would start racing. I get that lump in my throat. I was nervous for some reason. Even though I was alone in my own home, with nobody around to hear what I was doing, for some reason I was breaking a sweat, as if I was standing in front of a crowd of 10,000 people. I just didn't understand this. I often speak, and I don't feel this way when I start speaking, but for some reason when I'm doing this recording in my home, I didn't feel that way. I felt extremely anxious. To make matters worse, when I needed to speak about something and demonstrate it at the same time, I got doubly anxious. I just couldn't possibly do anything right when I tried to combine these two skill sets. So throughout my first course, I settled on a workflow that separated speaking from showing or demonstrating. And then in editing or production, I would bring the two components back together. Now, of course, at the time, I used a tool that was extremely difficult to work with in the editing process. So that only compounded the challenges or the pressure I felt when I was initially creating the audio and video, and the need to separate things out to make them perfect before I even brought those two components into the editing tool. Of course, this workflow worked, but it was a lot of work, and it was rather daunting, and it almost led me to never want to do this ever again. But I enjoyed the results of doing this so much that I knew I had to find a way to improve. I wasn't going to simply just do things the same way a second time. For the second course I put together online, I sought out some tools that would take some of the pressure in the editing process off of me, that allow me to make changes a little easier, so that things didn't have to be as perfect coming into that process. I still separated creating the narration and the demonstration and stitched them together in editing, but because I had some tools that alleviated some of the pain, even simple mistakes, like mispronunciation, could be corrected with a quick retake, and then in editing I could cut out the problematic part. By the end of the course, I was able to transform how my mind viewed the entire process, such that I could correct for all kinds of things in production to adapt and change as I go, and not feel so much pressure when I was recording narration the first time or recording a demonstration for the first time. I didn't feel the need to have to get things right. And I noticed something. I noticed I wasn't quite as nervous when I flipped that mic on. Now don't get me wrong, I was still somewhat nervous, at least too much for being alone in my own home, but something about the process made me less afraid of turning that mic on, which meant I didn't worry so much about getting things perfect, which ironically led to a more productive workflow that only made me more excited about doing a third course. And of course, then in the process of starting my third course, I asked myself, well, what could I change about the process this time to take some more pressure off of me? To improve yet again, because even the second course was still rather daunting, and I knew there had to be a better way. I knew something of all of this hinged on the fact that I got so nervous when I just turned that mic on. If, like when I speak, I didn't get so nervous, I'd be able to turn that mic on and just go at it, and I wouldn't spend so much time taking and retaking and redoing because I wouldn't make mistakes in the first place. And if I did, the rare random mistake, well, that would be easy to fix in the editing process. One of the things I did in my third course that I would never have dreamed of doing in my first and second courses was decided that there's no reason I shouldn't be able to turn the mic on and not only not be nervous, but also I should be able to combine both demonstration and narration into one continuous workflow. And if I made some mistakes along the way, No big deal. I should be able to snip those out in the editing process, and everything would work out at the end of the day. Of course, I was really hesitant to do this because I had this process that had worked well for 2 courses thus far to create these 2 separate components and then bring them together in editing. I was very skeptical that this was even going to work, but something inside of me said, you know what? You've just got to try it. And I said to myself, you can't just try this one time because you know it's not going to be good the first time. I said to myself, you've got to at least try this 10 times. So I sought opportunities to try this new workflow before I began my 3rd course, just to kind of prime the pump and see what was going to happen. And you know what? After the 3rd or 4th time, things just started working. Not only did they start working, but they were wonderful. By the time I was ready to start my 3rd course, there was no way in my mind that I wanted to go back to my old style that just a few weeks ago was the only way I felt I could even work. There's just something about doing something a new way and having it behind you and knowing that you are successful at doing it that leads you to then take the next pass at it, the 2nd and 3rd and 4th pass at it. And after you've done it 4 times successfully, something changes inside of you. This confidence builds up and the fear dissipates. During my 3rd course, I was so excited with the risks I had taken to try things a new way that I started switching out other tools and other techniques I used throughout the process. I'm in the process of getting ready for my 4th course now. And just today, I asked myself, what's the one thing that scares me that I think just won't possibly work out for me, but still holds this significant opportunity for improvement? Something I know if I just push myself hard enough will possibly lead me to some significant improvement in how I go about creating these courses. And I found it today. One of the few things that's remained constant throughout my 1st through 3rd courses is the microphone I've been using. Now I'm happy with the audio I've had thus far. It's great for the type of courses I'm creating, but there have been times where I've got some feedback, and in the process of cleaning up the audio as it is with the current microphone I have, there can be a lot of work to try and fix for things because of the environment in which I record and because of the microphone that I'm using. Now, by no means is it necessary for me to make these improvements. Nonetheless, all along I've had this nagging sense of the other microphone types I could be using that might be able to fix the majority of the audio problems that I occasionally have. But I've been resisting trying these microphones out because they would significantly change, at least in my mind, how I go about creating my courses. Thus far, I've been using a lav mic, which just basically slips into my clothing. It's one of those mics you often see clipped to somebody's tie, or you don't often see because it's hidden underneath somebody's clothes. This style of microphone affords a lot of freedom as I'm recording. The microphone moves with me, so it's easy to move around, wave my hands, change my positions, and things come out pretty good. Though there's a little bit of a problem because the closest I can get this mic to my mouth is somewhere along my shoulders or my chest. This might not seem very far away, but in terms of microphones it is. Especially because it's an omnidirectional mic, which means it picks up every bit of sound from every different direction. And because it's far enough away from me, the sound coming out of my mouth is at a lower level when it reaches the microphone. And then any background noise in the room, which this type of microphone is great at picking up, like the hum from my computer. Anyways, that background noise is rather significant in terms of the sound coming out of my mouth. So in the process of cleaning that background noise out, things become distorted, and the acoustics of my room are also somewhat echoey, and the two combined together makes me sound rather awkward when things are cleaned up. It still sounds okay, still sounds intelligible, doesn't stop somebody from getting value out of the courses I'm creating online. However, I couldn't help but wonder if I did try one of the different types of microphones out that I've been apprehensive about, would that fix a lot of the problems I've had with the microphone I have thus far? So I went out tonight and I grabbed one of the microphones I've been the most apprehensive about. I chose a microphone that's a lot like the one a radio broadcaster would use. It's a boom-mounted microphone that only picks up sound about 6 inches away. So that means I need to keep myself within 6 inches of this microphone. And that's what I've been apprehensive about, because I've been worried this type of microphone would stifle my freedom. I wouldn't be able to be animated. I'd be attached to the microphone. I'd slouch over and I wouldn't have a lot of passion in my voice. I wouldn't be able to see my computer monitor because I felt like the microphone would have to be right in front of me. Even this last weekend, I was telling people how I would never dream of using this type of microphone. But you know what? I pulled it out of the box tonight. I set it up and I gave it a try, and it was amazing. The sound just simply blew me away. As of this recording, I've only really been using it for maybe a half an hour at most, and I already feel extremely comfortable with it. Now I know there's a learning curve ahead of me, but I'm confident as I use this throughout creating my next course that I'll learn a lot about this microphone. I'll learn how I can use it to take advantage of it, to have amazing narration in my course. And I can't help but wonder if by the end of my course I don't look back and think, well, there's simply no way I would go back to the way I did things before. Now, I'm not trying to say that every new thing I try out works out for the best. There are plenty of things I've tried in the process that didn't work out. I learned that they didn't work, and I moved along and I went back to the way I was doing things, and maybe I tried something else instead. Every time I do something significant in life, for a second, third, or fourth time, I could just do things the same way, or I could pick something that I would like to improve. And specifically, I've found that I like to pick the things that are the most daunting to think about improving or changing. The things I'm the most apprehensive about changing often lead to the most substantial transformations. I can't wait to start my 5th, 6th, and 7th courses and change things that I wouldn't imagine changing at this point that lead to some substantial improvement that I would like to make. My challenge to you, look at something you do rather routinely that's significant, not something inconsequential, something that takes a substantial amount of your professional or personal time. Think about an improvement you would like to make in what you're doing on a routine basis, and ask yourself, what's something that I'm extremely apprehensive about changing that likely would lead to that improvement? And then ask yourself, what's the first step I can take to start making that transformation?